พูดได้เสร็จ
การจ้างฝากร้านเขาบอกเลย
They cannot compare, they can't match me, I'm at half speed. I got your girl and she laughing and dancing, hanging on my butt, she asking to crash with me. Smash with me, she savage, she wants cash money, and she knows that I live lavishly. I wanna live, I'm cold inside. Give all I have just to feel alive. I fight to live, I fight to strive. One day I'll have what I want. I want the whole world in the palm of my hand. I got a plan, I'm the man. Now I'm teaching the game, a veteran, better than anybody else who tests me. I'm ready, looking at my hand and it's steady. I'm trending, ascending and blending, lyrical bending. Now I'm spreading and getting my name out now. Yeah, they hear me laugh. All the crowds repping the sound. I'm hitting the ground, running, up and coming. Ain't nothing, yeah, rookie of the year. I'ma keep it 100, cold-blooded, no budget. From nothing to something, I ain't bluffing. I got a full hand and a full plan. I ain't gonna stop till I'm at the top, man. Every single drop got me feeling awesome. I'm about to pop, started from the bottom, yeah. I wanna live, I'm cold inside. Give all I have just to feel alive. I fight to live, I fight to strive. One day I'll have what I want in life. 'Cause me shook from the way your body looks. Got me riding hooks, got me feeling like a rook. I don't do it by the book, but for you I'll take a look. Don't know what your mama took, sweet and spicy like a
ทำไมมันไปตั้งเฉพาะสมาชิกเมื่อกี้เพิ่งเห็นในนี้มันแก้ไม่ได้เลยเจ็บอันนี้คืออะไรนะ
เอาไว้ไหน
ไม่ได้แหละ ฮะ
Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Touching on your body feels like taking on a drug. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. Everything you do, I can't seem to get enough. You got me feeling good, yeah, you got me feeling numb. I could look at you all day.
No one people
ถึงสิอร่อยด้วยนี่เศษข้าวเปียกหอบมาจากประเทศลาว เขาทวนก่อน
โอเคเปิดเสียง Hello, 5 people. Nice to meet you. Okay, time to eat, everyone. I love strawberry.
Your gut health. Sign number 7 would be a white tongue coating, because the tongue is supposed to be pale pink or skin color. But if it starts getting a white coating, that is very often a candida overgrowth. And one reason you get it would be a high sugar diet, but it could also be several factors involved, because it's opportunistic. It takes advantage of imbalances. So if you have a dysbiosis, if you have an imbalance between the beneficial and the pathogenic species of microbes, now it takes advantage of that imbalance. If you don't have enough beneficial bacteria to sort of keep the bad ones down, now it starts popping up. And then of course, if you eat a bunch of sugar, that makes it even easier for it to grow. And now you can get an overgrowth also of other yeast and bacteria in the mouth. And what we want to realize is that every part of the body has its own unique culture blend of bacteria. So usually when you talk about the microbiome, but you have one for every part of the body. You have one in your ear, and you have one on the skin, and in the mouth, and in the eyes, and so forth. And if you have an imbalance in your mouth, now you can get a weakened immune response in that microbiome in the oral cavity. Sign number 8 could be easy bruising And one reason for that would be that processed foods don't have a lot of vitamin C. And vitamin C is necessary for the production of collagen, which is that structural protein that you find in all connective tissue in the body. We have a lot of it in the skin, that's what people usually talk about it, but of course you also have it in your blood vessels, in the capillaries. So now, if they're damaged, if they're a little bit weaker, and you bump up against something, now that could cause you to bleed, even for a little bit of an impact. And then there's another vitamin called vitamin K that we also don't find much in processed foods, and that's your clotting vitamin. So if you don't have enough of the vitamin K, now first you start bleeding because of the vitamin C lack, and then now you get a little bit of a bleed, but it doesn't stop bleeding, so now you form that bruise very, very easily. And once more, I'm just amazed at the wisdom of the body and how everything supports each other, because the microbiome, the healthy bacterial flora, actually produces a significant portion of your vitamin K. Sign number 9 would be increasing blood pressure. And the number one reason for that is that you have insulin resistance, because with high levels of insulin, that increases the amount of sodium that the kidneys reabsorb. So the normal function for the kidneys is to filter out the equivalent of hundreds of bottles of water every day. But then reabsorb something like 99.5% of that, so that when you go to the bathroom, you only pee out like 1 or 2 bottles a day. But if you have insulin resistance, now instead of 99.5, that might increase to 99.6. And even though that's just a tiny little difference, that's going to keep more fluid in the body. And water and sodium always follow along, so if you have too much fluid in the body, that's going to increase the blood pressure. So processed foods is the number one reason for insulin resistance, but processed foods do a lot more. So they produce advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, which are those proteins that get sugar stuck to them, which damages the tissues. You get ROS, reactive oxygen species, which is basically free radicals or excess free radicals. You get inflammation, and processed foods also have very little magnesium, and processed foods also contribute to dysbiosis or gut imbalance. So what all of these have in common is that they affect the function of the blood vessel. That's called endothelial dysfunction. So the blood vessel is not just a tube. It's not like this PVC pipe where fluids just passively flow through. The blood vessel is alive. It has muscles in the wall, so it can contract, constrict to increase blood pressure, or it can dilate to lower blood pressure. And the body regulates this all the time because it determines how much blood is flowing to the different parts of the body. But if you have endothelial dysfunction, that means that the blood vessels don't work properly. They don't regulate the flow and the blood pressure properly. And overall, they tend to stiffen, which would mean that blood pressure goes up. So that's another factor that contributes to high blood pressure. So we need to understand that sodium plays a role in high blood pressure, but it's not like you've been told. It's not a primary role, it's a secondary role. So I know that wherever you go, the first thing you're told about blood pressure is to cut back on the sodium. But a healthy person, a healthy body, knows how to regulate sodium. It knows even if you eat 3 times as much sodium, your body can get rid of it because it's a very easy mechanism if your body is healthy. So in other words, it's not the sodium, it's you have to get unhealthy first, and then your body becomes unable to regulate the sodium, and now you have a problem. Sign number 10 would be that you seem to catch every cold and flu that comes around. And there are many reasons for that. We'll go through these. One would be that if you're low in zinc vitamin C and selenium, you might catch a lot more colds because these are necessary for white blood cell function. White blood cells, that's the cellular component of your immune system. That's the mobile, the circulating portion. And if you eat a lot of sugar, of course, sugar suppresses white blood cells. Who is surprised at this point? I don't think we've ever found anything good about sugar. And if your bad diet causes a weak gut, or unbalanced gut, now you're going to have a weak immunity as well, because 70% of your immune system resides in the gut. It's called GALT, G-A-L-T, gut-associated lymph tissue. And that makes sense because everything that you put into your body needs a barrier. It needs to be shielded from your body. It needs to be processed before it's allowed in, and that's what GALT does. And when it comes to immune system, we absolutely have to talk about the brain and stress. So if you do have a bad diet, that can influence the brain, like we talked about. Unstable blood sugar is unstable energy for the brain. And if you don't get the proper essential fatty acids, you can't build proper cell membranes. But we need to understand how fundamental the role of stress is to the functioning of the body. So anytime that you have stress, your body is trying to defend itself. There's some sort of emergency that needs dealing with right now. And when you have a stress response to something, then your body is allocating more resources to deal with that right now. And that means it's allocating less resources to something else. So whenever you have a stress response, you're going to turn off or reduce the amount of resources going to your internal organs. That means your digestion and your immune system and your reproduction and your DNA repair and your healing. They're just not that important in that moment when you have an emergency. And that's why stress is so critical for us to understand and do something about. So anytime that you have a stress response, when you have increased stress, that means that you have fewer resources allocated to your immune system. And we need to understand that a stress response is necessary. You wouldn't survive if you couldn't respond to different stresses. But the question is, how long does it keep going and how strong it is? And that's the brain that determines. You're supposed to have the stress response, but the brain is supposed to control the magnitude and control the length of it. So if you have a well-working brain, then it will be a lesser magnitude and shorter duration. The stress doesn't control you. So the brain is critical in that aspect. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.
How did you do it? How did you go from 116,000 to 3 billion in transactions to owning 2 today? I always tell them the same thing. I started with operations, with property management. I think a lot of times people want to start businesses and they put money into those businesses. They don't know how to run them. They don't know sales, calls, everything.
หยุดก่อนไม่ได้ถ่ายแป๊บเดียว
ได้สิ
how to manage
ทำไมแต่ไม่ได้ไม่แบบนี้ได้
มาทุกคนกินเฝอกินไม่ใช่เฝอสิมันเป็นข้าวเปียกคนลาวเขาเรียกข้าวเปียกอันนี้ผักอะไรก็ไม่รู้เขาบอกอร่อย
My nutty pudding and my first and salad
ลองกินที่เนี่ย
ไมโครเฟนเวจจี้มาขนาดนั้น
อืม
กินก่อนเลยอ่ะ
ร้อน
อร่อยไหม
มึงต้องกินของเรา
มีพริกแห้งเหรอ
อืม
อ๋อมันไม่กินรู้เลยแปลว่ามีพริกแห้งเหมือนไอ้ครีมแม่เห็ดโจ๊กอะได้ยังไง
How did you do it? How did you go from 116,000 to 3 billion in transaction to owning 2 today? I always tell them the same thing. I started with operations with property management. I think a lot of times people want to start businesses and they put money into those businesses, but they don't know how to run them. They don't know that sales solves everything. They don't know how to manage expenses. They don't know how to manage people. So one of my competitive advantages was actually jumping into property management because now I was able to learn all of those things on somebody else's nickel. And so by the time I actually got to the ownership side and put the ownership hat on, I knew how to run them. Now, I had a lot to learn, don't get me wrong, but I saw the problems before I bought the properties. I saw things that the sellers and the brokers never saw. So I was able to solve them. So everything I bought, I knew how I was going to fix it before I bought them. And that was my competitive advantage, I realized. It was realizing to be able to see what others didn't see and be able to fix the problems that others didn't see. And that's how I created value for myself and for my investments. I always tell people they should start a business, but I look at a lot of these 20 and 30-year-old influencers who, all they can really do is generate a lot of followers and influencers. There's nothing wrong with that. But they get a lot of money and they think that it's easy. It's not easy. And then they try to build a business later. So in other words, they're famous online, and then they try to get some kind of assets to support that because they realize that they too are a declining asset. I was lucky where I actually had to block and tackle from the beginning. I was hitting singles the whole time. I was just trying to buy real estate that cash flowed. And then over 20 years, I was able to do that successfully just by focusing on passive income. Then along came the pandemic. Some of you might have heard of it. Well, I got sent home. I started doing the YouTube channel and those kinds of things. So I'm talking about real things, experience and wisdom of things that I actually did. And I look at these guys online, no offense to any of them. Some of them I watch, some of them are really entertaining. But they still don't know how to grow a business. They still don't know how to manage a business. And they still don't know how to scale a business. Well, what they're good at is TikTok. So after 5 or 6 years of being in property management, I realized that I'm never going to get wealthy. I'm going to have what I call a busyness. It's not a business, it's a busyness. I was just busy all the time. Property management's hard. So I realized I was going to have to start buying property just like some of the other people that I knew. So the first one, I used my own money that I had saved over that period of time. And like all of you, I believed that we should save our money so that we would have money to be able to invest in things. And that's what I did. But after one deal, I was broke again. Just like I started. So I had one deal, which was good. It cash flowed a little bit. I managed it, which was awesome. But I was broke again. So then I did it again. I saved a bunch of money and bought another one. But then I quickly realized if I really wanted to move the needle, I actually had to learn how to raise money. I had to learn how to get money from other people to be able to grow faster, quicker, and more successfully. So that was the piece that I never knew how to do. I, of course, didn't even know how to buy a building the first time, which I ended up doing. But then each step is a journey. So I think what happens is you start off by one step, and then two, and your circle gets bigger. The people start coming out of the woodwork. They start bringing you deals, and you start meeting lenders, and you start meeting all these things, and it's confusing. And there's a lot of people giving you lots of ideas. And I do believe that you should go very slowly. You should always go very slowly and very methodically. You should never just jump in because you watch something or read something. And I always believe you should know how to run it. In other words, if you can't run a business or you can't operate a property, then somebody else is going to have to do that for you. And you're not even going to know if they're doing it well or not so well, except for, of course, some of the most obvious things like I'm not cash flowing and I have a vacancy. Like, those are obviously easy. But I'm talking about all the details, the hundreds of details that are included, the nuances, and all the little things that you can do to move the needle on any deal to make it cash flow. And there's a lot of them, by the way. And over the years of managing lots of people's properties as a fee management company, I was able to experiment and get lots of experience from folks on deals that they would bring me, because at the end of the day, if you send them money, of course they're happy, and maybe you keep the business. But if you don't, you probably will end up getting fired. So that's a lot of pressure as a property manager. You have to dig deep for ways to be able to increase the value of a property through better operations. And when you look at that from a property manager standpoint, as you're buying an investment, you have a massive, massive advantage over those that don't know how to look for that same thing. All they can do is raise capital and hope that they're in the right market. You know, I never came from money. My parents didn't have money, and so I didn't know anybody that had money, so that was a problem. But secondly, you know, when you manage properties for other people, you're also taking a look at the way they put the deals together. You're looking at the way they structured their partnerships. And then I was meeting just regular people. Like, these were just normal people, like doctors or lawyers or CPAs and business owners that would come visit the property. And they would go, yeah, I just invested in this. I just wanted to check it out. And all of a sudden you start to realize that there's just one person sitting in the middle of all that that knew all these people and kind of put that whole deal together, both on the debt and the equity. And then they turn it over to a guy like me, and they wanted to perform. So once I started to realize that all I needed was just a different circle of influence, I needed to be in those circles. And you start to realize that you can be in those circles because those folks are working hard. Maybe they're dentists, maybe they're doctors, you know, maybe they're CPAs, maybe they're lawyers, maybe they're business owners. I can assure you they're all working very hard, and they don't have time to invest in real estate because they're doing their thing. So, however, what I realize is they don't want all their money sitting in a stock market, let's say. So what they're always doing is looking for people just like me or just like you, smart people that understand what they're doing, to invest alongside of, to be able to buy real estate and cash flows to create passive income for them. Because at some point, they are also going to retire, and they want to have that passive income coming in as well. For me, there was no aha moment. I never measured my success on money ever. I always measured it on passive income. Like, I was always trying to replace my monthly burn rate, which way back was like $5,000 a month, which seems like a lot of money. Now it's not so much thanks to our inflation rate, but that's another story. But the truth is, I just was trying to buy real estate. I was afraid of the stock market because I didn't understand it. I was putting money in the stock market as well as probably a lot of you. But I would get those quarterly statements, and I was like, I don't even know why it went up or went down. I have no idea. And then you get the standard line from the wealth manager, financial planner, or whoever that didn't know either. So I was like, oh, there has to be a better way to be able to put my money to work somehow and create passive income. And then I realized not only was I getting that, but I was getting all this massive tax advantages. I did not realize the tax advantages could offset some of the things I was doing in other areas. And so I started to pay less and less tax. So really what was happening is I was working and doing other things, but I was paying less tax, so I was able to keep more. In other words, if I wouldn't have done anything with real estate at all, I would have paid more tax. So I ended up actually not really making a lot more, but paying less tax. So therefore, I had higher savings as a result of paying less tax legally. Because the government rewards people to invest in real estate in the form of depreciation and other things. But they basically are not very good at providing housing. Like, the government sucks at housing. Like, just take a look at all the projects, you know. the government is not a very good landlord. So they rely on the private sector to do all that. And so for that, they give you big tax advantages. That's fun, because once I started to realize that, which was not my strategy in the
เอาไว้ตรงนู้น
beginning,
เลย
I also realized that there are thousands of people that have that exact same scenario. So that's what happened when I met Robert Kim Kiyosaki. They had a tax problem. So I thought, oh, I'm being so smart and raise all this money, not from them, but from all these other people, to be able to buy deals and, progress forward with my own business plan for my company. But what I didn't realize is what they really wanted was to be able to offset some of the taxable income, because that's what real estate really does for people that are in these bigger tax brackets. There were so many things that I realized, like what happens is, I believe every corner, especially when you're your late 20s, you start to be cocky, you have a little bit of an ego, and then 30s it just gets worse. Well, so when I met Robert and Kim, I started to go speak with them. Of course, they'd never been on stage before, so they asked me to come to one of their events. And I went in the room, there's like 400 people sitting there, all trying to learn about real estate, investing and stuff. And I actually realized, because you could see it in one room, like there's a lot of need here. There's a lot of people that really could use this knowledge. And back then, this is pre-internet, he would pack a room and they would all show up, and he was trying to teach people, all based on, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and of course before that. So I went on stage with him, and he's like, tell him everything you're working on, and he walked off stage. So I was standing in front of 400 people. It's the first time I ever spoke in public, and I realized, well, I was scared to death, first of all, but I realized I completely messed it up, I'm sure. But I walked off stage, maybe 10 minutes later, Kim ran up and saved me, because Robert has a great way of letting people sink or swim, and I'm grateful actually for that opportunity. And she came over, saved me. I went to lunch right after that, and there was like 50 people that came up to me and just were peppering me, wanted my card, wanted me information, because I realized that they were all investors or potential investors. So I was like, wow, this is a great way to raise capital, go to these events and speak, and also teach. And if I'm lucky enough, maybe I'll get a couple of them to take a look at some of my projects. So that's why I started writing the books and started teaching and started touring around with Rich Dad. Well, what happens is, there's rent appreciation, there's market appreciation, and then there's ego appreciation. Like, ego goes like this, right? Because just because the market's going up, people believe that it's them. And so in my 30s, I was no different. So I call it the big flip. So one of the big deals that I did was I was doing condo conversions. So I would take apartment buildings all over, talking about Tucson, in Scottsdale, Arizona, in Portland, Oregon, and in other places. We'd buy these apartment buildings, and then we'd sell them off. Like we did, I think, almost 1,000 units in Las Vegas, as an example. So we'd buy existing apartment buildings, even brand new ones, convert them to condos, and sell them off one by one. So that took about 4 years, and we had wild success. We started a condo realty management company, a condo sales company. Of course, we were a developer, put this whole complex financial structure around it, and we made a lot of money. I mean, a lot. At the end of all of that, I had no real estate. I had a lot of money. I had upgraded my whole lifestyle. I had bigger houses, nicer cars. I had done more fun stuff. But I didn't have any assets that produced income. I had basically just worked my butt off and done one big flip of about 3,000 units. That's all I did. So I didn't own anything, and that was my big lesson. So as I went into my 40s, I said, I'm never going to do this again. And that's when I ran into one of my many mentors. His name was Leonard Litwin, and he was called New York Lenny. He was building a project in Arizona, and he asked me if I would help his grandson put it together, which I did. I ended up helping on that project, and then he called me one day, and he said, would you like to buy it? And so I bought it, and I still own it today. It's a property in Sun City, Arizona. And that's when I realized the power of cash flow. So he owned about 10,000 units in Manhattan, and he'd been in the business for a long time. So I was grateful, and I was listening. I didn't say a word. I just asked as many questions as I could. Because when you get around somebody like that was a billionaire at the time, you listen. You don't talk. And so that's what I ended up doing. I just followed that same philosophy. He just said, listen, if you hold through the good times and the bad times, and then just use the bank to harvest your money through cash out refi, tax-free, trust me, you'll look back and be glad you did. And so that's when I changed my strategy, a long-term hold, manage well, take advantage of the tax, and do a 1031 if I wanted to roll into something else, which is just a 1031 tax-deferred exchange. You can take anything that you bought and move it into a tax-free vehicle and roll it into another asset without actually paying tax on it. My ego got really beat up over time. You know, what happens during these different cycles is you guys, there's booms and busts that goes on. And for a lot of you, all you've ever experienced is a boom. So you don't learn anything when you make money. You don't. In other words, like I said, rent growth, market appreciation, ego appreciation. Like, that's the way it goes. Like, people's egos make them believe that they're really, really smart. And, of course, they make really bad decisions. They start saying, I like the Superman complex, you know. I can do anything. You know, I can buy here, I can do that, I can raise all this money. And they just go and blow. Well, it's not a great strategy if you think that the past is always going to be the future is. You always have to check yourself and make sure that whatever it is that you're going to do, that you really, really understand it. You have to take off all the blinders that we all have, because that's what we have. And so you have to step back, and I always call it, you know, a coin always has three sides. You know, there's the right, the wrong, let's say, and the edge. If you can stay on the edge and look down at each side and really be objective, you're going to make better decisions, not only with your money, but with other people's money. So I bought and sold a bunch of stuff, of course, through my 30s. And when I'm 40 years old now, I'm like, wow, I need to build a long-term strategy, and I need to scale a company. And that's when Ross and I decided to merge and also plant a flag and say, we're only going to grow and we're going to keep the projects over the long haul. And that's what we did. The thing is we both didn't know how to do it. We both had small companies. We both had mild success now looking back. But now we wanted to grow a business that was 10,000 units. We didn't know quite how. We didn't know that we were going to be at 300 employees one day. We didn't know how to do that. In fact, at the time, I think I had one person that was answering the phone, doing the counting, and actually looking at deals for me as well. So we literally went from one person to 300. I didn't know how to hire a COO, a CEO, a CFO, a CIO. I didn't even know any of those words. I just knew that I needed real quality, smart people in those positions. And that's what I strived to do to build my business so that I didn't have to work so hard. Because what I really wanted was the financial freedom that real estate provides. And I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, actually. And I wanted other people to do it. So I believe that a company exists to provide cash flow for you without you even working in it. That's what I believe. I believe that that is what gives you the ultimate freedom. And then what happens is you want to. You actually want to do it. But you learn a lot. When you build a company that doesn't actually need you, that's when you really learn. So now, of course, I've got things dialed in the best I have, at least. I'm sure I'll learn even more in the future. But my investment committee met last week, and I missed the call. I was actually doing something else, and I missed it. But they put an offer out for $96 million without even talking to me. I just saw it come through. So I was like, I go, hey, Bobby, our acquisition guy, I go, send me the full forma and all the numbers on this. You know, I haven't even looked at it. I don't even know what it looks like. So when you get to that point, it's actually remarkable, because what you've done is you've given people the ability to make decisions and put deals out that are actually within what I would call my buy box. They know exactly what I'm going to ask each week. So they were able to put something out like that. But when you get to that point, it empowers people, because the whole company is moving along again with or without me. And that is the entire purpose for a company. And that's where you got to get out of the way of your own ego. So then the next thing that happened on that deal was, so I missed the first meeting. So we got into best and final, because that's what my group's good at, is getting us into best and final, which means that they break it down to 3 or 5 different kind of groups. And then you go in with a whole other strategy. You know, they do, and they buy your questionnaires, and they want to know where your debt and equity comes from, and you know what your underwriting criteria is, and all of those things. Then you get on the phone, a lot of times with the seller and the brokers. So we scheduled another meeting because we were going to up our price a little bit because we really liked this asset and it had a really good cash flow. So we scheduled that meeting, and I missed that meeting. so I missed 2 meetings. So we upped the price, and now we're in what is called the 3rd round, which will be hopefully next week, and we're still in it. But the point is I missed the first 2 meetings because I have a very capable team to be able to get it to this point. Now, I've looked at the deal since, I've seen the pictures, and I looked at the numbers. I am happy with them. But they're not driven by me. So I think what happens with a lot of folks is, especially what holds them back, is that everything needs to go through them. So you see this a lot through really, really smart people, typically. Like, let's look at surgeons or doctors. Let's just pick on them. At some point, there's only so many patients they can see in a day. This happens with realtors, this happens with CPAs, this happens with dentists. At some point, there's only 24 hours in a day, there's only so many people they can see, and there's only so much revenue they can see. And so their variables are, of course, how much they charge and all those kinds of things. So you do have a little flexibility because you own your own business and you can work as hard as you want. But who wants to do that? Who wants to work that hard? And so the key at this point is to figure out, are there things that people can do for you that are a better use of their time and not your time? In other words, what's the one thing that you should be working on at all times to drive the company forward financially? And in the beginning, I do understand that everything has to go through you, and there's nothing wrong with that as you start. But what I find is that people start working more. First they work 8 hours, then 10, then 12, then 16, and then they're just burnt out. Now they're working 7 days a week and they have no life. So the first thing that you have to do in order to scale is, of course, find people that can do what I would consider to be admin work or administrative stuff. Like things that don't make you money at all, but things that drive money to the bottom line because they're better use of your time. Well, so for an example, last weekend somebody asked me, if you were starting on your own and you had one person to hire, who would you hire? And I thought, I'd probably hire like a bookkeeper or an analyst. And they were like, well, why? I go, because that person can do financial modeling for me. That person can pay bills. That person can go out and understand and look for things that is coming to me in the email in the form of business plans, rent rolls, financials, and those kinds of things, and put them into a model and get them ready for me. That person can go out and look for new markets and those kinds of things. And now all of a sudden I have somebody doing all of those things that I consider to be research and admin. And now I'm focused on just the one sheet that actually has the numbers in them. Now from there, I can make good decisions. Is this a go or no go? And now I'm more efficient. I can do all of those things. I can scour the internet at night. I can send broker emails. I can go look at markets. I can go do modeling. I can do all of that stuff. And you have to know how to do that stuff. The point is, does that make you money? I always say, follow the cash ball. Is that losing your money or making you money? So we're very clear on what our one thing now is. It's to grow the company to 25,000 units. And so for that, we need a whole new layer of people that can get us to that point. As far as analysts, acquisitions, new markets, equity sources, etc. All of those things have to be put in place because let's say my company is running at 1.0 and that's 10,000 units. To go to 2.50, 25,000 units, that's another gear. You have to have different people in different positions and you have to think different. Over the years in this business, I've met many, many, many billionaires. If you want to learn exactly some of their best practices, check out this video that I just did on billionaire traits. I've met over 20 billionaires, and here are the top 5 lessons that I've learned. So the first one is that everyone starts at 30,000 feet. In other words, they're always looking at the macro. They're looking at what are the needs and what can I solve and what is the best way and the highest way to actually make a lot of money by solving somebody's problem. They're always staying at 30,000 feet, and they hire other people to do all the work. So I'll give you 2 examples. I have 2 very good friends. One started a company, a personal ID security company called LifeLock. And all he did was recognize that a lot of people at the time were getting their social security numbers stolen and their credit card numbers stolen. So he created a whole industry around it, even though he didn't start with that experience. And another good friend started a corporate ethics company. He designed who could be the most ethical company in the world, which he did, and he later sold to the New York Stock Exchange. Both of these are personal friends of mine and started with just an idea and had no experience in the space at all. Both of them started with something that is very obvious today, but at the time they had no experience and it wasn't obvious to everyone else. So I always use this example with real estate. If you're driving by a piece of property and you got a 20-acre piece on the right-hand side, I look at it and I see multifamily. Another friend of mine might see an office building. Yet another might see a retail center, and another one might see a grocery store. So everyone has a different look. A home builder, a condo builder, or whatever it is, everybody has and sees what they see. So the person's ability to see bigger or something different, that's how the rich get rich. They see more than what just is in their own lane. The second one is leveraging smart people. And the reason I underline smart is because sometimes people just get hired and they're not necessarily the best at what they do. So this doesn't necessarily have to be people that you employ. These could be leveraged through other businesses. For example, with regard to real estate, I might want to find the best brokers in the area to find the best properties, and then I might find somebody who can tell me the highest and best use for that particular piece of property. That's leveraging other people that know exactly what they're doing. And then what you do from there is you put all the money together, and then you hire the folks either internally or externally as part of the project to be able to bring it all the way to the end. So in other words, you don't have to build a great big company to pull these kinds of things off. You can very easily use other people, or OPT, other people's time. That's what you want to do. You keep your vision at 30,000 feet, you find the very best people that can put this whole thing together for you, just like you would a puzzle on a kitchen table. And knowing who those people are is going to depend on what exactly your 30,000 foot goal is. One thing to keep in mind is you don't necessarily have to have the whole strategy figured out before you start. When my partner Ross and I started our business, we were nowhere near $2 billion in assets, nowhere near. The goal at the time was 10,000 apartments, and we of course didn't know exactly what we needed and when we needed it. So like all businesses, when you start with an idea like this, it's you pushing a rock uphill. And as you start to hire smart people and smart consultants and smart businesses to help you, then you start to get more and more help to push that rock, and eventually it actually goes down the other side and starts growing exponentially. The third thing is that you got to be focused on one thing. Now, Gary Keller has a great book called The One Thing, and he absolutely nailed it. Because what happens is you have to have one thing to focus on. For us, it was 10,000 units. That was our one thing. We didn't exactly know at the time that we needed a CIO, a CEO, a CFO, and all those other C's. We didn't know. But we ended up having to hire those people to be able to manage the 10,000 units that we have today. So in my 2 examples, my good friend who started LifeLock, his one thing were monthly subscribers, because that drove the revenue for him to be able to build the business. And for my other friend who did the corporate ethics company, his was who wants to be the most ethical company in the world. And he ended up having big names like Ford and Aflac. They all wanted, of course, to be the most ethical business in the world, which, of course, prior to that had never existed. So ours, of course, was 10,000 units. And once we hit 10,000 units, our new one thing became 25,000 units. The fourth thing are benchmarks for success. So benchmarks for success are really important. For example, if I want to buy 10,000 units in 10 years, I simply say I need to buy 1,000 units a year for 10 years. Then what you can do is you can break that down into quarterly goals. In other words, 250 units per quarter is 1,000 units a year times 10, that's 10,000 units. Each 30,000 foot version has an end game. In other words, it has a goal at the end. For us, it was 10,000 units. You simply work backwards, and then you build the company from the ground up based on those metrics. So at the end of each of those metrics, obviously in 1 year, it's pretty easy to know whether or not you bought 1,000 units. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. You need to have equity relationships or lenders, or you need to raise more capital, you need to find properties or hire more acquisition people.